Hey buddy, how you doing? A little bit of football talk today. So I'm here from the Dells on vacation. I want to talk about football, defense. Now, I put a video out before about what I thought that were the top 10 defenses. I'm going to talk about what I think is my favorite defense ever. It's going to shock you. The 1991 Philadelphia Eagles. I'm not even an Eagles fan. Far from it. But I got to give credit where it's due. Now, you're going to say to me, well, how about the 85 Bears? I've talked about them. The 76 Pittsburgh Steelers. Any of the Steelers you can pick in the 70s. The Harvey Martin, Randy White Dallas Cowboys. The New York Giants with Taylor. All these teams won Super Bowls. The Eagles didn't even get in the playoffs in 91. They were 10-6 in the 16-game schedule. Third place. Washington, who won the Super Bowl, was 14-2. And Dallas, starting to get better under Jimmy Johnson, finished 11-5 as a wild card. And Philly at 10-6 didn't even get in playoffs. How the heck can you make that one of the best defenses? What it meets the eye, I'll explain. First of all, Joe Theismann, a Super Bowl winner himself, has more than once talked about what he thought was the greatest defense ever, the 91 Eagles. Joe Theismann. Here's why. I'm not going to say it was the greatest, but it was one of the greatest. It does not get anywhere near the acclaim it should. That's very underrated. I believe on par with 85 Bears, 70 Steelers, on par. The 1991 Philadelphia Eagles had absolutely no offense. Okay, Steelers' defenses of the 70s were complemented by a great running game with Franco Harris and stuff, and an offense that could put up points. Okay, same with the Giants when they had Morris and Phil Simms, and even the 85 Bears had Walter Payton. They could score. The Eagles of 91 had no offense. The first week, in the first half, any chance of greatness for them, Randall Cunningham went out with injury. They had shit for backups. And over the hill and totally done Jim McMahon, Brad Gable. They brought in, I forget his name, he was a veteran from the Jets, Ryan. It was a carousel of quarterbacks that was horrendous. They had no offense. The team only scored 285 points in the 16-game schedule. That's horrendous. Okay, for a 10-6 team to only score 285 points, they allowed 244, which I believe was the third lowest. Something like that. It wasn't the lowest in the league, okay, but it was still a very low. So how is this one of the best? Well, you can understand where this came from. No offense at all. So the defense was always in the field. Despite that, Philly's defense, okay, led the league in sacks that year. They had the fewest total yards ever in the history of a 16-game schedule. And now it's a record because the league last year went to 17 games. Of course, nowadays everybody rolls up points and yards. It'll last forever anyways. A little over 3,500 yards. Number one ranked in passing. Number one ranked in rushing. Only a little over 1,100 yards rushing, which is about 75 yards a game. 70 to 75. That's nothing. The fewest total yards in the history. That's more than the Bears, the Giants, or any of the teams that won a Super Bowl. With no offense. They were on the field so much. I remember that year. It was a joke. The only reason why that team had a winning record was because of their defense. Any other mediocre type defense, they would have been 6-10, 5-11. I just wonder what they would have. I believe they would have not have beaten the Redskins. The Redskins were really solid that year. But I believe they may have been over Dallas and won like 12 games, 13 or so. That's how good that defense was. If Cunningham had stayed healthy. They just had no backup quarterback. And therefore, no passing game at all. Nothing. It was pathetic. One of the lowest ranked passing games in the league. Couldn't score points. Yet their defense kept them in every game and almost got in the playoffs. Okay? It was powerful that year. I mean, the Cowboys, if you remember, started to have during that time frame one of the best offensive lines in the history of the NFL from like 91 and 95. Nobody doubts that. And yet, in the second week, Philadelphia win. It's never happened to Dallas again during that time period. And Aikman gets sacked 11 times in a 24-0 Philadelphia win at Dallas. You never seen Aikman take a beating like that during that time frame. 11 sacks. That's how good that Eagles defense was. They had Jerome Brown, who tragically died in the offseason at the end of '91. Reggie White. It was just powerful. Pass rush. You couldn't run on them. Think about the fewest total yards ever in a 16-game schedule with no offense in a rough division that had an up-and-coming Cowboys and an extremely powerful Redskins team. And they still were able to almost make the playoffs. They wouldn't have gone anywhere anyways. When you score a minuscule amount of points as they did, their defense wouldn't have been able to hold the fort in the playoffs, one-dimensional. I got that. But you got to understand what they had to do with that defense always on the field, how good it actually was. The Redskins only allowed 224 points that year, which was second league. But guess what? They had an offense that led the league with 485 points, and Rippon that year was number one passing. In Dallas had finished above him, had Emmitt Smith, who was coming into his own, and Michael Irvin. They could throw the ball, run the ball. The Eagles couldn't do any of that. Now you put the Eagles defense on Washington, they would have been unbeaten. Matter of fact, the Eagles did beat Washington one of their games, one of their two losses. Okay, you put that Eagles defense on Dallas, they probably wound up ahead of Washington. It was that good, the defense. You put that Eagles defense on Buffalo, who was a runner-up, they'd probably win the Super Bowl. It was that good. Don't get fooled by the fact they didn't make the playoffs. There's a lot of factors in making the playoffs. You need a lot of things to happen for you. You need an offense to help your defense and vice versa. That was a one-trick pony team that year. Just defense. You look at the stats. Look at the history. Very underrated. One of the best defense. I'll say the best defense in the 90s. I'll put them up for anybody else in the 90s. The Oilers, who had good defense. The Cowboys, who won a couple of Super Bowl. The 91 Philadelphia Eagles defense was powerful. They could rush the passer. They could stop the run as good as anybody that I've seen. They just had no offense. And therefore, they just missed the playoffs. You can't win if you can't score, no matter how good you are in defense. 1991 Philadelphia Eagles led the league in total yards, and 16-game schedule was from 78 to 2021, and they were number one in that. And that is hard to do when you're always on the field. That's my opinion. 1991 Philadelphia Eagles, my favorite defense ever in the NFL. Have a great night. God bless.